They say hunting and fishing can be dated back more than 2 million years. Throughout the years, the historic angler and hunter has steadily evolved into the avid hunter and angler that we know and love today. Welcome to the Outdoor Defiance podcast. As you listen, you will hear comical stories, companies talking about their products, researchers talking about their research, and overall ways to help you become a better outdoorsman. Welcome to today's episode.
What is up, guys? On today's episode, we get to talk with Cody Huhn. He's a very successful whitetail hunter in the state of Iowa. Public land is his specialty, and he has some very cool tactics and ways he looks at different things. We get to dive into the different aspects of a piece that he looks at times a year and different tactics that he uses. We get to dive into just his overall story, how he got started, different things which shaped him to be him. He's a very passionate guy. I think you're going to feel that in this podcast. We also dive into self-filming, kind of how he does it, why he does certain things, and his drive for it. He's a very impressive human. He's very knowledgeable, and I think you're going to really enjoy this podcast just as much as Taylor and I did just sitting down talking to him. So without further ado, here's Cody Huhn.
So Cody, thank you for joining us today for this episode. I'm really excited to be able to dive into topics that we've kind of talked about before. I think this is going to be an episode that's going to give a lot of people a different look than a lot of the other episodes you've been on. But before we get started, kind of introduce yourself and tell us how you got started in the outdoors.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And, I'm Cody Huhn. And I'm originally from Michigan, as some of the greats are. It's just cut my teeth on a lot of the small properties hunting, like that 2 and 3 year old age class out there. Growing up, obviously, I like a lot of people. I guess I shot whatever buck come by. I'm starting out. I love deer hunting, so that's how I really started. But that got me into, like I said, the small properties in Michigan, looking for that more Pope and Young 2 and 3 year old age class, and then starting to successfully harvest those bucks. I started branching out, trying to find either better permission or even looking into public, really just trying to find that better age class, which never became a thing in Michigan, unfortunately. And that's why I ended up moving out to the Midwest. But, that's the very short version of where I started and kind of what led to me being here.
So has that always been archery, or did you start with rifle?
My first deer ever and my first buck ever was with archery. I was too young to actually to use a firearm. Plus, where I lived in Michigan was in a shotgun only zone. So, it was fine, but I'm just not a big shotgun hunter, and they didn't quite shoot as far. So I've always been predominantly archery. I think the only true good buck that I've ever taken would be actually this guy right here with the muzzleloader first year in Iowa. Otherwise, everything else has been with a bow.
What year did you move to Iowa?
Oh, that would be 2020. Was, I believe, the first season. Yeah. So I believe I took him in 2020.
And so in 2020, so before that, I'm trying to think how to word this. So before that, were you only whitetail hunting, and then or did you do any like elk, any other thing?
I have always been basically just a whitetail hunter ever since growing up, predominantly all whitetails. Michigan's big on whitetails. So just as lame as it sounds, I guess I've just been hooked on whitetails forever. So, that I think is where the passion, other guys divvy up their passions between like turkeys and, like you said, elk and whatnot, and going out west. And I just never had that. I've dabbled a little bit in turkeys. I was fortunate enough to have really great permission, and I didn't even understand how good it was back in Michigan when I did do a little bit of turkey hunting. I shot like two or three times back-to-back years, 10-inch beards, long spurs, and I was like, okay, this is lame, too easy. And come to find out, I was like, basically like handheld, and that never happens for anybody from my understanding. Yeah. But I just was like, I'm not interested in this, and I just continued to just focus on whitetails. And like I said, coming out here, I didn't have the land, and I knew the public was good, and so I've just been diving into the public and just really hammering on the whitetails and just trying to effectively target that upper age class. And I tried to do that even back in Michigan, but the age class just wasn't there. So I took what I could get,
So did you move to Iowa just strictly for the deer hunting? Or
so I moved to Iowa for a internship with Midwest Whitetail. I grew up watching them, Bill Winke and whatnot. Oh, yeah. And they were my heroes. That show was, everything to me. That was originally, I had my channel. I've had my channel for like 7 or 8 years now, and I have a couple extremely old videos on there from back when I hunted Michigan, and I'm trying to make it like Midwest Whitetail while I'm on this, 10-acre property in Michigan after this maybe 100-inch buck, and it's everything's trying to do it like Midwest Whitetail and copy them, and that was never going to happen. But I left the videos. I like to watch where I've grown from, and it's cool to see that and show other guys. I don't try to hide anything. Includes if I flub up shots and miss stuff, even nowadays. I try to be as transparent as possible to show guys that I'm just like anybody else. I love whitetails. So but
that's where you and I connect, because I've chased mule deer in Nebraska, but I ended up shooting a whitetail because I couldn't get it done. So the last few days I was like, we're going after whitetail so I can get it done. But my passion has been chasing, and I believe Gunner's is too, but he's, trickled out a little bit for elk and stuff. But like my bucket list is kill a mature deer in every prominent like whitetail state. So like Kansas, Oklahoma, which we've done that. We live here, Texas, Iowa, Illinois, all that stuff. That's like it, I would love to go kill an elk. Don't get me wrong, but I would rather go kill all the mature bucks first and then kill an elk. So I love how you said, I don't really, that stuff doesn't drive me, because I don't know what it is about that mature class of whitetails. It tears me up. So obviously, look what we're doing with it.
Yeah. It's just different. Like I'm the same way with that. I know I get guys all the time and friends that try to get me to come out to go bear hunting with them or elk hunting, and I'm like, I would rather take my limited funds and go whitetail hunting. I'll just find another state to go hunt in. Like, don't you ever get burnt out? Don't you want to go do something different? No, I just want to go chase another big buck in another state or in another area or on another tag. Like, and I love it because you got your early season, and then you got your rut, and then your post season, and then or not your post rut, and then your late season. I'm like, so if I could have a tag for each of those seasons, and I'd do that, and then jump to each state, because like each of them are their own. They're good in their own ways, bad in their own ways, and it's its own experience. And I just love every bit of it. So I never, guys always tell me I'm going to get burnt out with it, and I just never do. I could hunt every day for whitetails, and I would never get burnt out with it.
What you talk about whitetail being your passion, kind of like all three of us. What do you think is the defining factor that makes it to where, like, if you could divvy it down to one or two things that are just the most, highest on your list that makes whitetail hunting your absolute favorite?
That's a really good question. It's kind of a hard question because I think it's such a broad. I have so many answers. I think one, just because of like the heritage where I grew up and came from in Michigan, whitetail hunting especially was just so instilled. So that really gave me the appreciation for just hunting, hunting deer in general. And deer to me, when I think deer, I think whitetail deer. I don't think like mule deer. So, and then that has evolved into probably the starting to chase and being able to chase mature bucks and playing that game, I guess you could say. That is the hook. So the deer hunting is the foundation, but the hook that keeps me coming back, keeps me wanting to go to another state, wanting to check the next ridge, look into the next corner, and just continuously be out there, it probably has to be the chasing a mature buck wherever I'm at, because that's just finding, postseason scouting, just finding that sign where you can come across and know that that's a mature buck. That to me I just love it. It just gets my blood flowing so much. So I would say that's the hook that continuously keeps me going, not just, keeps me out there. So
I gotcha.
Yeah, I like the fun of chasing an animal that's been in that area, for 5+ years and has survived. He's very smart, obviously smarter than me. 99.9% of the time, at just at 0.01, I outsmart him. I got to capitalize, and but that's what draws me into finding something that knows the place that I'm in better than I do, and then figuring out how to take him down. That's what drives me absolutely insane. And on top of that, I have people hunting next to you, around you, trying to do the same thing, and just being able to do it before them is this. I mean, when people do it before me, I'm like, I go congratulate them, but the fact of just going out there, that's what drives me to, like, I don't know, I just ate up with it, man. So
yeah, I agree. It's just one big one. It's all together. It's a big package, and it's just one big, you could say, game, and it's addicting.
Yeah, very. So what I'm looking over your head, I see those 3 deer. What are their stories? Kind of give us a short story of each hunt on those.
Yeah, so this guy, like I said, it was wasn't my first buck in Iowa. It was my first buck I recovered. I've told a short story before where that bow season I shot like a 135, 140, and I had liver hit him. He come in the rut, and I liver hit him. He ended up going and jumping into, like, I can't remember what river it was. It might have been like the Des Moines River, but it was huge river system. It couldn't have been in Des Moines because I was further over by Iowa City. So I can't remember what river system it was, but it was massive. And he jumped in there and just basically floated out of my dreams, which would have been close to my number one, if not my number one at the time. So that was pretty heartbreaking. And then I just kept at it and got him on a long line late season. The story isn't, all that magical. It was just me understanding where they were bedded on the private up in the ridges. They had to come down to food. It was on, they plant agriculture on the public out here. So it was a uncut public land cornfield, and it had been getting hammered with pressure. But unlike everybody else, I just, I waited for the right time. We had a giant snowstorm coming in. I accessed differently. So a lot of guys were accessing, and a lot of the deer were basically, getting bumped out, and then that would cause them to stage up late and then come in from one particular direction. And so I accessed from a different way, and it was a lot more work, but right thing to do. Kept my wind, safe. I guess I was just barely cutting my wind and blowing it back down in the creek. And so they ended up coming out really early, and then he was about the last deer into the field, and I just waited and waited and waited. Bare tree, didn't want to move, and luckily he made it into bow range just before dark. So not too much there. It's kind of like your typical late season hunt. I just was able to execute everything, 100%, which is what you have to do late season. You can't be wrong by this much, otherwise it's done. And then the far one here, this buck I killed him the year after in archery season on a wind switch. Wasn't a ton of intel on him. I was just getting a couple pictures and some intel of where the bucks were bedded on predominantly like a north wind, and then on a south wind, I just assumed they had to be in the public still on these ridges. I got in between. I was hoping that he wasn't down in the marsh and that he was transitioning. And sure enough, when that wind switched around, and that was right about the time wind switches were becoming a thing. And I didn't intentionally go in there with the idea of a wind switch. It was just kind of putting 2 and 2 together and thinking he has to be here and he's going to be here, with that switch of that wind. And I was in between, and he come in to like 60 yards. I had grunted a couple times, finally got him to come right down the edge, again, just on an off wind. And he basically right to the base of the tree, and I just plugged him with the bow. So that was pretty cool. And then I had a giant experience with a buck in gun season there. Just couldn't get it done. Had a couple years of, guys will know the Caesar buck. That's why I went buckless for a couple years there. I devoted my whole season to that buck. And we can get into that later if you want, but I guess you could say that's the one that got away as of
Yeah.
right now. And then last year I finally said, you know what, I'm pulling off of that buck, and I'm just going to get another buck under my belt. And I got this guy right here in the middle. He was a cool buck. I J-hooked him. I've been talking about that with some people where, bucks kind of how they J-hook their bed. Well, I've been doing a tactic where I'll either J-hook their bed or J-hook where I believe they're going to backdoor out. And you only do that, make a caveat, you only do that when you don't have a good backdoor entrance and you have to get around the buck. And you don't always have to blow your wind into the buck. If you can J-hook them with your wind in the opposite direction and still get on that back door, that's your number one for sure. But I had to J-hook him, do it at an extended distance because the only way in was essentially he was up in a corner, so I had to blow wind into him. Just did a big giant J-hook, come in that back door, and sure enough, he tried to burger out the back end, and I was lucky enough to be there. So,
Wow. So, and then go ahead and talk about Caesar, since you said, he's the one that got away. Tell us that
yeah.
story.
Oh man, that buck, me and him both, had each other's number all the time. So after, like I said, after this guy right here, roughly the same area. Obviously, it was like, hey, this is a good area. I deployed a bunch of cameras. I ended up picking up the buck that I named Caesar. And he was, 165, 170-inch clean 10. Looked a lot like this guy right here.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't have been, a giant, but wouldn't have been nothing exceptional, at least for out here in Iowa. But I just dedicated my season to him. I had a ton of encounters, and that was the first time I've ever truly dedicated myself to a single buck. So for that whole bow season, I was just constantly on him. There's a ton of videos where we'd have encounters, playing cat and mouse. He'd be just out of bow range, coming in and turn off. I passed him one time in super, super low light. I just didn't because I wasn't going to have it on film. And then that year, I made a terrible shot on him. He didn't stop how I wanted him to stop, and he was just into my wind. He kind of come in on this doe late rut, and the video's on on the channel. I don't hide it. I'll be the first one to say it was not a great shot. I tried to frontal, do a frontal shot while in the stand. I know that's not great, but I shot high, hit him in the neck, and I didn't push him, which was actually the flaw there. If I would have pushed him, he probably would have died. I probably would have found the buck, but I didn't push him. He laid up in the creek. He clotted. I got pictures of him a couple days later alive. He almost died that winter. Was very sporadic in the late season. I only had sightings through other people of him, and then I hunted him, would have been 2 years ago now. I hunted him hard, had a bunch of encounters with him. He was kind of messed up because I had shot him the year before and he almost died. But a ton of encounters with him. I missed him once at like 50. I tried to rip one at him and he just ducked the arrow. He'd played that game before.
Yeah.
And again, a couple encounters. One time he had a doe pinned down and I tried to sneak up on him out there in the marsh, and I got within 35 yards of him. I got it all on camera too. It's that's another video. And I was drawn back and waiting for him to stand up, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, I'm going to pull it down. As soon as I pull down, he stands up, take a couple steps and disappeared into the tall grass. And it's just, we had a constant back and forth. There's so much we could get into. We could do a whole podcast about that one buck. But unfortunately last year he never showed up. Like I said, I dedicated 2 seasons to him. I'd hunt other places and I had some encounters with other bucks and misses some other bucks, but he was 80-90% of my 2 seasons there. And last year he fell off the face of the earth. I don't know what happened to him per se. Nobody has told me they found him. None of the neighbors have seen him. I've done a lot of looking. I never found him. I never found his sheds. I never found, his skull. We had a kind of, not terrible, but we did have an EHD outbreak. So my 2 theories are: 1, EHD got him and he's just up in a private piece that I can't get to, maybe one of the cattle pastures up there that nobody really hunts, up by one of the ponds, and he's just gone. Or the other option is that maybe when I started chasing him, he was 4, not 5 like I thought. And they say that when they're 6 years old, that's kind of their ghost year. And so maybe he just ended up moving off or coring up somewhere else. And he was just in such a tight area that I just wasn't able to pick him up. You would think I'd have a picture.
Yeah.
But
or someone seeing him.
Somebody, it's not unheard of, but I would unfortunately, and this is going to be the first place that has asked and has the information, but unfortunately, I think the Caesar saga is officially over. I do think he's gone. So I'll make it in August. I have a video coming out talking about that, but I guess everybody's heard it here first. Unfortunately, I think Caesar is officially gone. So I've changed my outlook on where I'm hunting and what I'm doing since he's no longer a thing, probably.
That's crazy. Talking about that 6.5-year-old disappear, you can't see his rack, but that deer right there over my shoulder, he's my biggest one to date, and that's what he was 5.5, disappeared, came back at 7.5, and no one knows where he went. No one has pictures of him when he was 6.5, and where we hunt, it's kind of an isolated spot where the river runs around. Which, yes, I know they'll cross it, but they don't normally cross because one side of the river has absolute giants, like a different type of giant than what we have, and then our side has this gnarly, like he is, or super wide. So they really don't cross for some reason. So I'm like, I don't know where he went. But then 7.5, I have one picture of him the night before I shot him. The morning I shot him, or the morning before I shot him, that evening he was 4 miles down the road at my cousin's, and then traveled in the daylight to me for that evening hunt. That's the only time anyone saw him at 7.5 too. So I don't know what he did, but that's I thought he was dead. I thought something got him. I figured maybe one of the few out of state hunters out there we don't know maybe shot him, and I just didn't tell anyone, or something like that. But then I ended up getting him. So I hope that's what happens for you. I hope Caesar pops up and surprises you, because that would be cool to think your season's over and then, or not season's over, but that chase for him's over, and then boom, here he is. So
Taylor has a good story about his buck. He does.
What about it?
The muzzleloader buck. Just like the whole encounter, like how crazy it was.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was like, which one are you talking about? Yeah. No, I had to watch him for over an hour and a half before he got in range, and he chased all over, and I shot him. I think is that what you're talking about? When I shot
just
him?
Yeah. Just how crazy it was.
Yeah, I shot him. Thought I dropped him, and next thing I know, he comes walking out of the timber to my right again with 2 minutes left. I thought I dropped him in the Milo, so I couldn't see him. And I'm sitting there, and there's like 25, 26, somewhere in there, does and bucks just running around. And all of a sudden he comes walking about again, and I'm like, what in the world? No wind. And I'm like trying to reload my muzzleloader as quiet as I can. I'm in a tripod. I mean, deer everywhere around me. And I get reloaded back up, and he's just looking around. And I put it back on him, shot, and he disappeared again. I was like, okay, I don't know. Maybe I got him this time. I have no idea what happened. And went down there, and he was still alive, shot in the lungs, and was trying to get out and would fall over and get up and fall over. I had to go back to my truck, get reloads, get back in there and get him. It was the craziest thing I've ever encountered in my whole life with a deer. So I know it seems tragic, but it shows you how strong those deer are. And that's another thing I think I have a huge passion for. So
that's wild, because I have an episode, I can't remember which one it is, from a couple of years ago, where I was hunting with Gary Gruno, and I mean, almost word for word played out. The buck, was actually kind of going to go back into the thicket, come out after some does, and he shoots with the muzzleloader. It kicks. We think it went in there and went down, and then we get quiet because I still had a tag, and so we're high-fiving and whatnot, and I don't know, it's 45 minutes later, all of a sudden his buck that he shot comes back out, and we're sitting there like, is that your buck? I think it's your buck. And I only remembered because it had a pretty unique, small G4, because it come out on the inside and it was palmated. And if I hadn't seen that, I'd have been like, man, it's like a twin or something, It's no, I'm like, dude, that's your buck, man. And it comes into 40 yards and looks right at us. And I'm like, dude, just crack him. It has to be your deer. He shoots him, and we get down, and sure enough, he had hit that off shoulder on the other side, and it had deflected. It didn't go in. Hit his shoulder blade and bounced off, and so, and then obviously the second shot just ripped him, dropped him at 40 yards, but couldn't believe it. So it's a similar story, with a muzzleloader. Man.
I have another one I'll tell real quick before we get too far off subject, but I ranged one, and I got it at 305 with my rifle. And I hadn't picked up a rifle in a long time because as soon as I shot him, I went straight to archery. And then this year I had a different job, so I picked up my rifle for opening morning. Had a tough season. Go to a total random spot. Right at daylight, see a rack pop out. He goes back in. I'll kind of paint the picture for everyone too that's listening or watching. It's basically a pond, has a draw behind it, has a couple thickets in the draw you can't really see in that draw, and that goes to a wheat field to bedding. Deer and rut, one of my favorite places to hunt. So I went in there that morning. I was like, it was new to me that year, and I was like, I'm gonna go hunt this place. And I sit out there, rack comes out, runs back in. I can tell he's chasing does. I see it. When it comes out, broadside, arrange it. It was like 305. All right, I can make that shot. He kicks, runs down there. I'm calling my buddy. I'm like, hey, I just killed him. I don't know what it is. He's tall. He's super cool. I killed him. And then I'm on the phone. I'm like, dude, there's another buck that looks just like him right here in front of me. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, what in the world? And I'm like, I have to get off here. I got to figure this situation out. And hung up, looked at this deer. Well, his leg was weird. His back leg was weird. And I was like, it was one of those things. I was like, that has to be the deer. Looked just like him. He kind of came out where he went in. But he is not from there. He was 300 and he worked his way chasing a doe. Let's mind that. Chasing a doe, got down to 150. His leg was kind of weird. And I was like, maybe he's just not dying. I'm going to shoot him. I'm just going to shoot him and hope I don't find another one. If I find the other one, then I'm going to have to do the right thing and call myself in or something, and I shoot him and drop him. Come to find out when I ranged him, I was hitting a limb and he's actually at 485. So I drilled him in the back leg and he still came out chasing a doe and was trying to fight another buck, which I'm about to release that video. Was trying to fight the other buck off his doe with the leg just absolutely broken. And I was like, and that's what I was like, golly, like these deer are insane tough. So yeah, it's another story like that I have that super cool, but super bad on my part, but it happens in hunting. So
you do it long enough, you'll always have something like that happen to you.
Yeah, you're in injure one, you're going to shoot one and not find it. So luckily last year, that was my deal. Biggest buck to date. Thought I put a great shot and couldn't find him. So, I'm hoping this year.
Of having cool stories. I either hit him perfect or I miss completely. Like I don't. There's not or like when I do hit him weird, like a buck I killed 2 years ago, he kind of jumped string on me. So, aiming for that, behind that shoulder, and he kind of turned a little bit, and I shot him right in the neck. I mean, it ended up being like a glorious shot because he ran 50 yards and dropped and was, deader than a doornail. But yeah, I don't.
You've missed a couple and hit their back from them ducking, but it wasn't nothing that would kill them.
Yeah, no, I've been lucky enough lately.
Yeah,
lately.
Better be knocking on some wood.
Either like miss everything, like you barely clip them or miss everything, or shoot them about as perfect as you can. But
it'll happen. Don't wish it on anyone, but it's gonna happen, and it sucks. So I want to kind of get back. You said you moved from Michigan, and then to Iowa. When you moved to Iowa, were you like, I'm going to strictly hunt public land, or were you thinking you're going to find a lease, or what was your thought there?
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure because I had taken that internship with the Midwest. I wasn't sure how much time I was actually going to have to truly hunt because the camera guys really, they didn't get any time to hunt. And if they did, it was only after, whomever they were filming was tagged out, and then maybe they got to shoot like a management buck on the farm. So there was a chance that I was going to be filming Jared Mills predominantly. And there's an episode where he ends up shooting, and I believe it was in 2020, where he shot the black-eyed 10, if people can remember that buck. If not, you can go back and find the video. That was potentially, if I end up filming Jared and he had tagged out, that was potentially going to be the buck that he was actually going to be gracious enough to let me hunt on his farm that year.
Wow.
Yeah, would have been phenomenal buck, would have been my number one at the time. Big buck. It was an old buck, just didn't have much potential. So even though it was pretty decent, and I mean, big enough that he ended up shooting it as one of his bucks that year, he was going to potentially let me take that buck. We had talked about it early on, but basically I ended up becoming their back end editor. So I did all of the polish work and the building other episodes for some other shows that they were working on and whatnot, and cleaning stuff up. So I had a lot of seat time at home, and that gave me the ability to have the freedom of my own time. Rather than hunting with them, I could just do the work at night, get a couple hours of sleep, and get up in the morning, or skip a morning, skip an evening, whatever, and hunt myself. And so I had a ton of freedom that year to just hunt myself. And I didn't have a lease. And when they were hunting their farms, they didn't want me coming out there hunting their farms, and I wasn't going to ask them to do anything like that. And I didn't prepare so much for the idea of being able to get a permission farm or a lease of some kind or anything like that. I didn't have the money either. So that really just didn't play a role. It was just the idea of, well, I'll just hit public when I can. And then when I had all the free time, I was like, well, now I'm just going to pound public, which got me into just every day basically hitting public land and hunting it. And that, that's led to where I am now, where now it's a problem. It's a literal addiction. I just love going to new pieces of public land just to walk them.
I feel you there. That's what I've been doing here. We're from Par State that didn't have a bunch. There's some, but gets absolutely hammered, and which that's a whole story too. But since I moved where I am now, the doors have opened on the public, and that's kind of what drove the passion for me getting out and putting cameras out and all that. But what I'm asking that, or why I asked that question, is my main subject I want to go over with you is, when you pull up to a new piece, what are you looking for? And then how do you dive into it and all that? So and before we dive into that, I have one other question that's going to help people listening. When you say mature deer, what age are you saying is mature? What are you targeting? Is it 5.5 plus, 6.5 plus? What's your mature deer age?
So a mature buck to me on public land, and this is obviously debatable, is a 4-year-old.
Okay.
And I say that only because if a good 4-year-old comes in, I'll shoot it. Like, I'm sorry, I have missed 4-year-olds, and I've shot I've shot one, like the buck, this guy right here in the middle. He's a 4-year-old. He was a 4.5-year-old. He wasn't a fully mature buck. I got a couple episodes of shooting at or missing other 4-year-olds. I won't shoot a 3. I just won't. I passed some phenomenal looking 3-year-olds on public. If it's a good looking 4, I'll rip an arrow at it if it comes in and it gives me good footage and everything sets up. But if it's a 4-year-old and it's not setting up, or I'd have to push a shot or rush something, the footage isn't great, then I'll let a 4-year-old go. I have a couple videos of letting 4-year-olds go where maybe it's like a 40-yard shot and it comes in and just would have been pushing, I have a small window and I just let him go. So, but if the opportunity presents itself, I won't deny a good looking 4-year-old.
Okay.
As long as the score is there. But I do still skew pretty heavily to that 5 plus if I can. That's who I attempt to target.
Okay. I was just asking that because I think that's, a little piece of information of when we dive into this next subject that will be helpful for people to kind of understand what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So,
and when just to touch on that right quick, when I do go to look for stuff before we get into this, I'm searching for that 5-year-old. So like I said, the 4-year-old I'll take if it comes in. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's 5-year-olds, there's going to be 4-year-olds probably. So I'll take that opportunity. But when I'm scouting or hunting or doing anything, it's dedicated to a 5+ year old buck.
Okay. So going in the subject, when you're pulling into a spot, what's the first thing you're looking for? Are you looking at the spot with your eyes, or are you pulling up on Google Maps, or what are you looking for when you first find a place that you're interested in hunting?
9 times out of 10, I would say before I even get there, I've, obviously e-scouting, looking at the maps. It's rare that I just pull into a parking lot somewhere and just go, oh, I'm going to hunt here for whatever reason. It's predominantly based on factors of distance from a major like metropolitan area, at highway access, local town access. How are the roads? Like out here we have like level B roads, so which are non-maintained roads. It's going to be harder to access again. Water features, terrain features, all these factors. Human population of the county, deer population, historic like deer kill, like between like normal like hunting records and like also like EHD records, pressure and all these things. I even get into Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett within the history of the county, and that helps me paint a picture of if I even want to be there in the first place. So before I ever step foot on a piece of public that I plan to probably dedicate time to, all that is taken into perspective. The only time it's not is when I get pictures or consistent rumors of something specific, like a big buck in an area. And I'm like, well, I kind of want to target that maybe, or go look at that. Then I'll throw some of that stuff out the window, because obviously the big deer can be anywhere. I just like to hunt the areas that have more of them. So,
Right. So when you find the spot, what do you start doing? Do you run cameras? Are you going to walk it out? Are you going to look for postseason?
Yeah, depends
Signs?
on the time. Yeah, depends on the time of year of when I get in there. Preferably, it would be, postseason is when I would really get in there from the year for the year before I start to hunt that area to gain all that intel. And the first thing I do, get there, open Onyx, and I start marking, obviously, like a lot of guys, marking where I believe the best bedding is, because I predominantly skew towards trying to bed hunt, because that's a large part of October, and even bed hunting on like scrapes where they coming out of the beds into the scrapes. So you get like the first, basically almost all of October. And then really the rut is like a 15 to 20 day window where they're running all over, and you can still find pinches in those areas. And then you have all of the rest of November, and then December, and then January, where you're back to bed hunting, maybe with a mixture of food. So predominantly most of your season, and 70% of your season should be dedicated, in my opinion, to bed hunting tactics. So that's pretty much what I look at. I go into an area, I start picking apart where I think they could bed based upon your prominent winds. That's a lot of your south facing or east facing slopes. I see that they prefer those even early season, and even when you have odd winds, I still find bigger bucks on those east facing slopes. I prefer an east facing slope. That's, if I can find an east facing slope, no matter which way the point is or the ridge system is, if they have 100 yards off the point, and then off the, I guess you could say, where it connects into the ridge system, if I go there and there's, obviously cover, I can tell it's thick, maybe it's an old clear cut or just a hinge cut, or they do that out here in the public, or just low undergrowth. Those are the areas that I really start to key in on and look at. I don't run cameras postseason. Not a thing. I just shed hunt it, and then mark all the sign. That's the predominant intel, and I think that builds, 50% of your picture of what you can expect. And obviously, you can look at that and determine. It's going to be hard to see early season beds in that time frame, but you can use your imagination, especially if you're already at this high enough level where you're listening to this podcast and you're out there chasing these bucks. You're going to be able to go into an area and have an educated guess on the bedding based upon that and food. And so you go in there, you pick apart where you believe the bedding is going to be, and then at least you got that rut sign that if you did fail in the early season, you can now fall back on that into the rut and start picking up those corridors and those funnels in between those areas. And on the broad sense of things, that's kind of a really quick and easy rundown of where I start.
And then when do you go back in with cameras, and like, what do you do? How do you set up the cameras, and how many do you run typically?
Yeah. So I would say the next step would actually be coming into like right now, it'd be your summer scouting. I don't do too much boots on the ground summer scouting. It's more of like hitting the roads, trying to velvet film in the area. A lot of times those bucks will be dispersed. So maybe you're in the area and the buck is across the road now, or, half a mile away. I really don't try to go more than a mile. If you don't pick up on them, you don't pick up on them. It sucks if you don't always have that agriculture to really pick up on. But then getting into about this time frame, then I start deploying my cameras, setting them up towards and skewing them towards a couple for bed hunting. That's the tendency of, maybe I found like old scrapes within where I believe the bedding would be for early. So then you get in there, and that's where I like to put my cell cams monitoring those scrapes, put a couple SD cams maybe near the food, near the road, just getting an idea of what's traveling like to and from, coming in and out of that area, or just assisting that cell cam. That cell cam's in that pocket that you can't and shouldn't be going into right now. Yeah, you got time, but you really, come August, you really shouldn't be pushing them. You know, a big mature buck's only going to tolerate so much. Yes, there's going to be situations where a mature public land buck will continue to come back, but a lot of times it's going to push them. And so I get that cell cam in where I believe the scrape is, or the hub in that bedding area early. I run the SD cams where I can access on the perimeter, and then from there, then you're just getting into more of the season where now you're starting to throw like observation sits, or maybe the cell cam's going off, so you move into do a kill hunt. I think the first 5 days of season, no matter where you're at, especially at least here for Iowa, and it was true for Wisconsin too, the first 5 days are really good. I found banger movement those first 5-ish days. I've had opportunities where if I was just in the right spot at the right time, or I was just a couple feet off, that I've been on some big bucks, mature bucks, in those first 5 days. That's when after that it dips out, and I think you need to withdraw a little bit, let them do their thing, and then start the ramp back up as they start really scraping again. Not to say you can't get in and kill them in between there, because you can. We all know you can, but I think it becomes at that point camera dependent, heavily camera dependent, or observation sit dependent.
How do you think pressure plays a factor in all this? Because it seems like you were telling the story of the buck on our left, your right. You kind of use pressure almost to your advantage because you understood where it was coming from and how they would react to it. How much do you think about where pressure may be coming from and stuff like that? And how do you kind of react to that?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because pressure was a big factor with this guy. I like to call it situational conditioning, because every situation and every buck is different, and they're conditioned through their experiences like you're also conditioned. So, you go into, quick example, like big farms out here in the Midwest, we'll just say Midwest whitetail, their bucks, they don't receive that pressure, so they just react differently, and you get more of an opportunity to maybe bump them or push them or leave ground scent or blow your wind in a bad direction, where a lot of times you really have to kind of play that game and fill out these bucks on public land to determine, have they grown up in that lucky pocket that they haven't experienced that pressure, or what's their attitude toward it as well. And you can distinguish quite a bit of that based on, trail cameras. Do you have a buck coming in, or you hanging your camera low or even high? Do you have a buck coming in and he have a picture on the camera, looking at the camera, but then he comes back in? Well, that buck obviously doesn't care too much. So he might still be pressured, but that buck has a higher tolerance versus, there's pictures of bucks, mature bucks, where they come in, you get one picture of them, they see the camera, they disappear, and they never pop into that corridor again. That buck has no tolerance for pressure. So determining that level of what that individual buck can handle is a major factor, but also determining, the outside pressures and where they're accessing. And sometimes, I've seen areas that the back door is a well-known back door into a bedding area. And even though that's technically the best entrance to that spot, it's such high pressure that I've actually come in from, a less desirable way, but it's different, and done like my J hooks that I keep talking about coming in. And when I've J hooked in, then I've had a better experience where that buck's not maybe coming out the prime back door, but just off. And I've had opportunities or caught them on film a lot more by doing that. And it's just about doing something slightly different. But again, it's just going to come down to understanding the pressure of an area, which is going to require you either monitoring it with cameras, like cameras on main trail systems. I'll run a cell cam on main trails coming in and out of areas to just see how many people are coming in there. That'll help, plus obviously I was out there, so I can see how many cameras are out there. Human tracks, that gets me an idea of the human pressure. How far am I from like a metropolitan area, whatnot? That again, human pressure idea. And then starting to key in on that buck's specific characteristics, how leery is. Like a super quick example is that giant potential 200. I don't know if he's going to go 200. He's north of 180, somewhere tight in there. Just a giant buck that I have up on the channel. People are calling me crazy for posting, but whatever. That buck, when I was coming up the hill, He heard the car coming up the hill, and I parked. It was below the ridge. He couldn't see the car, but he had heard it. And when I popped up and kind of had looked from the road down into the field, he was already walking back to go jump into that ditch. And he's 400 yards away. So he went the 50 yards, jumped into the ditch, and laid there. And I'm looking through like this little saddle, looking down into the field, and he's in this bowl, and nowhere on the road else could you see this buck. So he's already in a pocket that just can't be seen, but he had heard the car. And just hearing the car never move once it got up there. And I had shut the car off. I waited an hour, and that buck never got up from that ditch. He just stayed in that ditch. He just kept pegged, looking up towards the ridge through the grass, and I could just basically see his rack. And he just watched, and he would just turn and just kept scanning and scanning. And I had the camera on the tripod sticking up so I could look, and so he wouldn't see me. And he just never moved. He was going to wait till dark. And so, that's a buck that I can tell immediately that he has played the game. He has been obviously pressured by people, and he's going to be a hard buck to kill. And so that changes my tactic and my idea of what I'm going to do. So I'm waiting until it rains. We got some rain coming in the next couple of days, and I'm going to go out there in the rainstorm and hang some cell cams. I'm going to put them high. I'm not going to do mock scrapes. I'm not going to, break branches, do anything like that, because I just don't think he's going to tolerate anything. I don't think if I move in there and do any changes to his habitat at all, and he has any whiff of me, and especially if I bump him, so I'm really going to avoid where I think he's coring right now, which is obviously going to probably shift a little bit. I'm just not. I'm going to hopefully don't bump him. That'd be the worst thing right now. But I'm going to get in there, try to hang the cameras, and just basically be like a ghost. And after the rain has come, washed everything away, because I'm looking for a heavy rain, not a light rain. Then hopefully, then I can start picking up on pictures of him and go from there. But he's going to be a hard buck to hunt, because I just don't think he's going to tolerate any sort of human existence or pressure. And I think I know that if I do, he's going to either move off to private, or he's going to push into this other section of public and not become unhuntable, but become extremely, extremely difficult to hunt. And that's obviously why he's as big as he is. I'm sure he's had other encounters with people that have every year forced him to make that shift. And I'm going to try to get on him early before he shifts by hopefully not bumping into him, and just try to make a couple very strategic kill days. And that's just kind of the plan. So I'm it's kind of good. I plan to hunt some other states this year, because it's going to be hard to not want to dive in on him. And so I'm going to be using the other states where I'm just not there, and I can just hold back until that right day, that specific time frame.
So how long do you think it takes you to like fully understand a piece? Does it take you just a season? Or does it take you a couple of years, or kind of how does that look?
That's another pretty solid question. These are pretty good high level questions. I like it. I would say, with how much time I spend in areas, if I dedicate a lot of time, postseason especially, I think the first year I can have a 60 to 80% picture of the area, just depending upon, maybe how thick it is or how open it is, how easy it is to cover. I think the thicker it is, I guess you could say the larger it hunts, maybe I only have 60% of the picture. And then the smaller it hunts, I'd probably have 80% of the picture. I have enough that I feel like I can confidently go out there and postseason scout an area and determine if I want to come back or not, just off of one excursion, which can be a day or two out there. I put a lot of miles on. I can easily do anywhere from 12 to 15, 16 miles in a day postseason. That's pretty common for me. I'm putting hundreds of miles. I mean, I eat through boots, put it that way. I have some nice danners that the soles are falling off of. So, I legitimately eat through 1 to 2 pairs of boots a year. Like, that's not a joke. But if the area hunts bigger than what it is, then I think that next year I pretty much have an 80 to 90% picture. And then by the third year, I have almost 100% picture. There's always some ever changing things on public land. That's something that, with public land every 2 to 3 years, it's almost like it can be completely different, between the DNR doing stuff human intrusions. I've had places that were great for 1 or 2 years, and then I mean, just an example here: the swamp where I hunt Caesar. That has become so popular now from these past couple of years. Yeah, I've had legit other shows reach out to me that have watched the episodes and in a nice way possible been like, yeah, well, we know where that's at, so we're going to go in there too. And I'm like, cool, thanks, man. Thanks for just telling me you're going to come in there. It's public land. You can't do nothing about it, but, I've had that happen. And there's obviously locals who know about that buck and have become more prevalent in hunting that. There's even non-residents who have figured it out, just happen to be in the area and put 2 and 2 together. So, it all comes down to I guess a bunch of different factors.
Yeah. So, I know the general question was, what do you do when you find a piece? So you found a piece, you found a couple deer, or you find the one, just like you said a second ago. Are you still going to go look for other pieces for backups, or are you going to solely focus on that piece?
Always look for backups. On just the last podcast I was talking, or a couple ago, I like to say like to have between 5 and 10 bucks that I deem as like huntable shooters every year.
Mm-hmm.
Bucks that I know are going to have that depth of cover that they can fall back into if I'm velvet filming them, or are going to core into an area on public. So, those 5 or 10 shooters, that probably took looking at 30 different areas. Maybe it's one unit,
Right.
but there's 5 areas in that unit that I got to look at. So, covering, vast areas like that, that's exceptionally common just to find those shooters. So definitely having multiple. You never want to put all your eggs in one basket. I did that with Caesar. Look how it worked out.
Yeah.
Granted, I was on them and I had opportunities and I flubbed them, but still, it cost me essentially 2 years of no bucks. And I should have had other bucks, and I had missed opportunities on other bucks because of that. And then this year, I'm really struggling with finding that giant that I want to throw everything I have at it, but
Yeah.
I know that's not the smartest thing to do. So I'm trying to talk myself out of, of just dumping everything into him and just being like, no, go still do your, other properties like you would normally do. I love velvet filming, so I'm still out, and I'm pretty much every day I'm just filming other bucks and trying to find, other big bucks. I just like doing that. Plus I don't want to go film that buck every single day and let everybody know where it's at. So I'm trying to be a little bit secretive about that here, but yeah, you definitely have to have multiple places on public wise. You just have to.
And then going in, when you look at say the specific spot for the deer, are you trying to hunt him where he is then, or are you trying to also find out where you think he's transitioning during, the early season rut, post rut? What do you do there?
Yeah. That question has a lot of different variables. Definitely, if I found a buck, it probably means I found him velvet filming. Maybe I found his sign postseason, which led me to velvet film in that area, and then associate whatever buck I filmed in velvet with the sign potentially, if the
Right.
age is there. So the first key in would obviously, like you were saying, keying in early, and that postseason sign is going to tell me for the rut where I think he's going to be. And I'm ever changing, like we were saying, like I'm always changing where I'm keying in, like early all the way until about the 22nd, October 22nd to 25th is going to be super early. So maybe a little closer to food, not quite on top of the bedding, unless I really feel confident where I've keyed in where exactly he's bedding. Then you get that kind of like that scrape transition phase, and that's when I'm going to dive onto that bedding, that early season bedding is at that time frame. And hopefully, either I know there's a scrape there or whatnot, but that's really when I'm going to key in on that. Then it transitions into the rut, which is more of just hunting an area for him, hunting that area. I'd still, as the rut goes, so as November goes from, like, let's just say November 1st through like the 25th, the 20th through the 25th, depending, those first, I don't know, 10 to 12 days of November, I'm hunting rut type, like obviously your funnels and your corridors like that, trails, doe bedding and stuff, tight to where I think his original early season bed was. And then as, you start to get out into more of like that November 15th and 20th and 25th time range, then I'm going to start bringing that circle out and start hitting those pocketed bedding farther away, because at that point, he's probably starting to branch out himself if he hasn't already. And I mean, there's going to be bucks. Obviously, everything's situational. There's going to be bucks that just stay in their little pocket the whole rut. That does happen. But I'm going to branch out, start hitting those fringes, and then we get into that more of that postseason, which food becomes more of a strategic point. And so I still have a big picture, because he could be transitioning more to food now into that December timeframe, but he might still be over here on a fringe. He hasn't pulled all the way back to his what could be a late season range yet. So I'm hunting food in like a general larger fringe zone. And then once you get into that mid-December, January timeframe, that's when I've sucked back up, kind of almost identical to early season bedding, but instead of being in the beds on him, I'm more stood off on that first solid food source, probably the one I velvet filmed him in. I found that they return to that pretty predominantly. Not always, but usually I find if there's been like a bachelor group of 3 bucks in a food source in the summer, one of the 3 is going to show up in late season and on that food source, assuming there's anything left and there's not like some high quality food right over here. And if there is, then I'm also paying attention to that, and I'm just bouncing between them.
So during that time, are you still moving cameras around, during the early season to rut, or are you trying to back out and just try to be in there as little as you can?
Yeah, I definitely used to do this. I'm not doing it as much anymore, but I used to run early cameras, which would be in July and August. I would throw cameras out, and I used to run anywhere from like 50 to 80, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, but I've always had anywhere from 10 to 25 cameras get stolen in a year, and that's with locking them and even putting some up high. Oh, I'd lose SD cards and just never have information from an area. Stealing cameras out here is rough. I don't know what it is about Iowa, but man, guys really like to steal cameras out here. So
Yeah, I've never had that happen. I've had people walk up, but never touch, never do anything with my cameras. So
cell cams usually get away. You get away with it. Like I've had unlocked cell cams not get touched. This was the first year I had somebody actually touch a cell cam. They opened up the door, they broke the latch, opened up the door, and pulled out the card. So I don't know, I never got them in front of the camera, but first time I've had a cell cam get messed with. But so I would run, like I said, 50 to 80 cameras, and I would run a giant group of them in July and August, and then I would transition them around basically in the October, like around the October lull when not a lot's going on. And obviously, the lull isn't inherently a lull. You just got to be really tight on these deer, especially with pressure. I would spend time moving cameras each and every day. I'd move a couple, and I do my best not like those. My cell cams are pretty static until late season. So they're there early, and where they are is there all the way until late season. Then I'll pick them up and then move them to late season food sources for that intel for late season. But the SD cams, those were the mobile ones. I'd put them out July and August. So I'd run a batch of them. And then around mid-October in the lull, I would start transitioning those to more like rut type terrain and wherever. And when I say that, guys are like, oh man, you're in season moving cameras. And yeah, for sure. But 90% of my cameras are either, for early season especially, they're either right off the road, right by parking lots, right on food sources where everybody's already hunted the crap out of them now by October, the beginning of October, or the deer just aren't daylighting there anymore, or they're, up some draw in some ditch 5 feet off to the side that I can just come right up and grab and go right back. So then I transition them into that late October, November time, the rut essentially. And again, a lot of those are on like creek crossings, easy access ditches, things where I have like bulletproof. Yes, in the lull, I probably have gone into a couple bedding areas, maybe too far a little bit. But again, a lot of my cell cams are in those more strategic bedding areas. They've been in there since July. So I still don't put too much pressure on a lot of areas, not any more than other people. I really like to use rivers and creeks and those draws to access those, or even just funnels that cross like a main footpath or a trail. If I know this trail, because I postseason scouted or I just look on the map and you could tell if this trail goes from here to here, maybe the trail is right here, and I know the funnel is right here. Well, if I catch them here, yeah, it might be a late night pick or an early morning pick, but I can know they probably went through that funnel or went really close. So I can hang a very low pressure camera that's easy to access, and I can go grab it and still know that I need to hunt when I go in to hunt that rut funnel that I haven't been there. And so then right around the beginning of December, when as we have that transition into our gun seasons, which I don't hunt the shotgun seasons, right around then is when I take all my cameras from rut style stuff, and some shotgun hunters are going to hate me, but that's when I move all my cameras to late season, which again, 90% of those are on field edges now looking for food sources. They're not really in bedding or close to bedding. Some are, and that might bother some guys, but I use everybody pushing deer, because like pushing deer out here is a huge thing. So I just time my camera movements with everybody pushing deer. So I'm just another dude in the woods pushing deer essentially at that point.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that my pressure parallels that. So that might get away with doing some of the more bedding stuff. But like I said, 90% of my cameras at that point are moved closer or onto food, because I'm setting myself up for that late season time period now for December 20th and beyond. So I'm not really bumping them. And if I am, they're probably being bumped by other gun hunters anyway at that point, because they've been pushed. They're being pushed and thrown around everywhere. So I try to be as respectful as possible, but I think that's a pretty solid layout of how I used to run cameras. This year's, with me being out of state so much, predominantly I'm throwing my cell cameras on some good scrape locations near solid bedding that I've pre-scouted, and I'm going to watch that, and then I'm going to make my move wherever, either on that giant if he's daylighting, or into some other bucks that I've predominantly found. I'm probably not going to run all my SD cams, but like I said, I'm going to be stretched thin this year. But I think it's worth it to try some other states.
What food's kind of king up there? Like, what kind of things are you looking for with that? I don't know if it's different than here.
What season, man? Like, what part of the year? Because we have, there's like no cover in Iowa. It's 90% food. It's not quite that, but I think it's like 78% or like 80 some percent is like agriculturally used or something. It's ridiculous. So, early, it's beans, like velvet filming. It's beans and alfalfa. Those are your two major ones. I've slept on alfalfa for quite a few years, but it's pretty. I see a lot of big bucks in that. Then obviously you transition into your October time period. Alfalfa is still good. I get a lot of corn. A lot of bucks on corn. We all know deer love corn, man. I don't know if I've gone anywhere that deer don't love corn. And predominantly come the rut, I'm not hunting food anyway. So I'm not, even early October, I might be in between where two cornfields come together or something, trying to catch them coming out of those like drainages. But it's rare that I'm in October and in November, unless it's late November, it's rare I'm on food. It's so rare. I just don't do it. It has to be like the first 5 days of season or the last 5 days, there in November. Otherwise I'm on bedding, at least somewhat close. And then late season is just, you have your beans, your corn. I think beans get hit harder than corn. Alfalfa is not really a thing anymore. Late December, alfalfa can still be good. Alfalfa and clover, if you can find it. Not late December, sorry, early December. Late November, early December. It seems like they hit the greens just as they fade out. So, and then you get into like actual late season. And it's like I said, beans. I think beans over corn if you have the option. I've seen that. And then sorghum. Sorghum is really good.
Yeah.
If you find an area with sorghum, I've seen that too. But that seems like it's not their favorite. But if it's the only thing in the area, they'll devour it, man. They'll be there every night.
Yeah, for me, it always seems like right as before it turns, they hit it hard. And then like right before it's time for people to start cutting it, they hit it super hard. I've seen them hit it. Like they eat it, yeah, regardless. But I'm saying those 2 times of the year, I will literally have seen bucks grab the base and just pretty much rip their head up the whole stem and take all that in their mouth and start chewing, And I don't see that as much throughout the year. So, and also if you're listening, you're like, well, we don't have a lot of ag fields, which is a lot of stuff down here. There's a lot of research online for what grows what time of year. That would be a whole podcast if we had to do that. So you guys can definitely check that out. Just make sure, food sources, there's a lot of native stuff if you don't have ag fields. And then around here, acorns are huge. So figuring out when those drop and which ones the deer like better. So I think that's important to touch on for people that are listening. Well, I can't hunt this because it doesn't have an ag field. You're missing out on a lot if you think that. So
Yeah, touching on that, I don't do acorns at all. I'm just not an acorn guy. Yeah, I know it can be great at times, but a lot of the places I hunt, swampy, nasty CRP, agriculture stuff, I don't do a ton of big ridge, big timber, big woods style hunting where the acorns are king. But I will say that if you have them, locust pods are really good, honeysuckle, autumn olive. I've seen bucks hit hedge apples late season if they have nothing else.
I've seen that too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some natural food sources that you can try to key in on there. So I know locust pods aren't quite as prevalent everywhere, but if you find a solid patch of them in a thicket near like cedars late season, and then like maybe the food's like a half a mile or quarter mile away, that's like, I'll core up on that. It's a perfect staging area before they hit the main food coming out. And a lot of times you'll catch them in daylight there. So I really key in on that. The hedge apples are predominantly only when they have nothing else. I've seen them big cattle pasture areas where all the greens have turned. Maybe there's not a lot of ag left. I've seen them eat that, but it seems like there's a very short window that they're on that. Honeysuckle and autumn olive, I know that's more of like a Michigan thing, East Coast thing. Those patches, they keep the berries. They have like little red berries. They're thick. They hold their leaves way into late season, especially, and so they still get some of that nutrients out of them. If you could find patches of those, the deer, one, they lay in them, but two, it's like a giant food plot. They just absolutely hammer them. So I found a lot of that. And there's also, cannot remember what it's called. It is like a stinging nettles. Deer, especially in the north, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and somewhat in Iowa. I've seen it in Illinois as well. Deer will eat the stinging nettles. They'll eat the leaves on them. Why? I don't know. And somehow it doesn't mess with their palate, versus like we touch it and it's terrible, but they'll hammer it, man. I've gone into areas and they just mow down whole areas. Duckweed. If you're in a swampy area and you find some duckweed, there's some videos with THP are hunting that. I can show you kind of what it looks like. It kind of looks like a weird lily pad looking thing, but that's a really great late season food source as well if you're in more of a swampy type terrain. One more dogwood, red dogwood. It like red, yeah. So it's like it looks just like a red, little bushy shoot that sticks out of the ground. They can get pretty tall. They can grow into bushes. Pretty predominant in like northern type areas and swamp areas. We even have them here in Iowa. There's some in some of the bottoms in Kansas and in Missouri. But it's red dogwood. It looks red. They will eat the crap out of the bulbs on those really early and really late in the season.
We've got persimmons.
Oh yeah, persimmons down here.
Persimmons, acorns, greenbrier. We don't just have we don't just have like a ton of. We have berries, but like we have a lot of like natural browse, like just like greenery that they'll pick on, that you'll pick up on, honeysuckle, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you guys are like, well, I don't have ag fields, don't overlook places. Definitely, your local wildlife agency definitely has research out on what deer eat. So look up that, because we'd have to dive in what state you are, what time of year, and that would be a whole another 2 hours. So, and there's a lot of research already done for you. So don't just listen, because our areas are different than Cody's. We do have some ag, but we have strategic acorn places that, 2 miles wide that run for 10 miles. So it's like totally different areas. So you got to learn your area and what they eat. So don't just listen to something and be like, well, I can't hunt that, because you might be missing the biggest buck of your life. So, and I'm saying that because I had to learn that. And once I learned what they're eating, I found some of the biggest bucks I've ever seen on public land. So that's definitely something you guys need to look into. So you have found the deer, you found their food source, you found their bedding. You kind of get while you're doing this, are you also looking for setups And then going on setups, what setups are you using to hunt these deer? Tree stand, saddle, ground blind, ground, what are you using?
Yeah, always looking for setups. I mean, I'll be walking in the woods, find sign, and be like, yeah, this would be a good setup. I might never coming back to to hunt it, but I'll take note of that. I don't really pin all my setups. Kind of what I do is just pin the sign and then just attempt to remember like essentially what the setup looks like in there. So I know that's kind of like, this is my whole life. So like guys are like, how do you remember everything? Man, it might sound crazy to you, but I swear to you, you can be like, I'm going to go hunt this area. And I can be like, yeah, man, all right, you're going to park right here. It's going to be off this road. And as soon as you see the gravel transition to dirt here, you're going to go down and you're going to see this old sign hanging. You're going to hang a left. You're going to shoot down this little ravine. There's going to be a big log. I can do that with probably a million, no joke, like thousands of areas.
Yeah.
But this is my whole life. This is all I do. So I just can kind of remember a lot of that stuff. So I'll just pin the, like, oh, there's a scrape, and then be like, look around and, well, that's my tree. Okay. And when I come in the dark or whatever, like, here's my tree. So I'm probably less strict on the pinning setups, more on just the pinning and understanding how the movement moves through there. I don't try to get hung up on a single tree too much, because if the wind switches, one day I might be 3 feet to the left in another tree, or 10 feet to the right in another tree, just picking different trees just based off that little bit of wind, throwing milkweed, and maybe it's swirling a little bit for whatever that day. So I'm 10 feet over here, something like that. I try to be dynamic with it. But, general areas, I definitely key in on, that's just based upon sign and whatnot. And that's, like I said, dynamically picking the tree though, every time.
Are you hunting out of tree stands, or what's your setup when you hunt?
Because of the camera gear, definitely tree stands. I've tried saddles and I love them in terms of, packing in and out, how light they are, quick and easy to tear down. The big issue I have is taking my setup and putting it under, the lines, and just being so close to the tree, having that setup. It just doesn't set up very well for my camera setup, my gear. I have bigger camera gear. I'm not running, tinier gear, because I'm trying to produce a higher quality, footage. And last year's footage is actually, it's better than anything I've ever filmed before, because I upgraded my camera, upgraded my audio gear. So I'm running a ton of gear. And so I predominantly need a tree stand, and I can't just run a tiny stand either, because I'm doing a lot of times I'm spinning in the stand, or I'm trying to do interviews and the camera is mounted to the tree in one way, set up for when the buck comes in. So that way doesn't work though for interviews on how you're supposed to frame yourself. So a lot of times I'm standing up and turning around and like crouching down on my platform, or like, not sitting on my seat, and I'm like actually just like kind of sitting on my heels to look into the camera and do the said interview. And you can't do that on a tiny stand. So for years now, I've ran a bigger stand, and I like the Cold World from XOP. That's about the right size for like a stand wise. But yeah, predominantly I'm running a bigger setup. I do like lightweight sticks though. If I can lightweight everything and packable everything, but the stand has to be predominantly a stand. I like mesh seats over the foam seats. I'm a mesh seat guy, and then it has to be not massive. I don't want, like a freaking hang on, but like a giant hang on, but it has to be somewhere in that in between stage between, maybe like the 0.5 or whatever versus, a giant hang on or something, somewhere in that odd stage.
Yeah. And then down there, do you have to set up every morning, or can you leave a stand up? And do you ever leave stands up?
You can leave stands up. So they're supposed to be, you can put them up 2 weeks before, and you have to take them down 2 weeks after. Otherwise the DNR can take them, or technically you can legally take them. They become everybody's at that point. Not that I've ever taken anybody's stands. I've seen people leave stands up all the time. I just kind of mark them. And if I've seen it for 2 years, I'm like, somebody hunts the piss out of that. So mark on the map, don't come here. Not during the rut, at least. Otherwise I'm going to walk in and have somebody whistling at me, and not to say that I haven't hunted areas where I know other people are in, but, I definitely mark those up. But you can, I pack mine in and out predominantly every day. Not always. Depends if I know I'm coming back, but you can leave them up if you want to.
Yeah, down here you can do the same. I don't remember the time restriction, but you're not supposed to leave them up year round. I don't know the exact rules, I guess, because I never really have to worry about it, right? Let's take a break from this podcast and talk about some awesome products.
Hey folks, let me tell you about Grit Knives. They're not just your average knife company. They're all about high quality, affordable, and unique products that'll make your outdoor adventures legendary. From limited edition pocket knives to rugged fixed blades and precision scalpels, they've got it all. Plus, their logo wear will have you repping the brand wherever you go. So whether you're out in the field or tackling everyday tasks, trust Grit Knives to be your go-to for top-notch gear that won't break the bank.
Are you looking for some of the best sounding turkey calls on the market? Then look no farther than Jag Calls. Since 2022, Team OD has been using their calls and have had great success doing so. Two of my personal favorite calls are the Mother Clucker and the America. And I mean, if it has a name like that, it must be good. Check out Jag Calls, that's JAG Calls, out at jagcalls.com. Hey, and while you're at checkout, use OD 2024 for a discount. Once again, OD 2024 for your discount.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
So another thing I think is important, we should talk about when you're diving into new places, is the terrain. We've kind of mentioned it all across where you're going to deer hunt. You're going to come across different terrains. I mean, from here to where you are, I think I said down there earlier, but I should have said up there. We're in two different completely areas. So will you go over kind of different terrain scenarios and how you'd hunt them?
Yeah. Something I like to key on is obviously, difficulty of access. I know that's just sounds like a basic answer, but it's true. And that's going to get you away from, most of the people. And a simple example of that can be, let's say you have a ridge system and there's 3 points. That middle ridge system, a lot of times, depending upon, if you don't have a clean access across the top, maybe you have access from the east into the west. A lot of times that middle ridge system, even if it doesn't hold the best habitat, that primo habitat, a lot of times that's going to be your mature buck habitat, though, or your mature buck, bedding area, because they're just not being pushed off of that. And maybe I know Dan Infalt talks about it. He talked about like stacking the bedding. So maybe they were in that primo habitat that's a little closer to some type of access and like ridges and whatnot, and then they've been pushed back. So generally, when I'm hunting ridges, I look at access. I try to find that middle point somewhere in between all the access points, and that's where I'm really keying in on for ridge systems. Switching over to, obviously I like to do my agriculture hunting, my like my big ag, swamps, CRP type stuff, like more of that Midwestern feel. Water. I mean, it's just the big thing. Boat access, which I don't have a boat, so I'm 90% of the time walking like the sides of lakes, the sides of rivers, and just out walking people. But being able to cross any type of water, whether that be a creek or any type of river, that's going to get you away from 80% of dudes. And it's not even something that, like, us saying this is going to magically change that. People just don't want to cross water. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them there's a big buck over there. They're just going to be like, well, I'll just hunt the other side of the river. He'll come over here. And they never do. And so 9 times out of 10, it's rare that I cross water and I find other people, maybe one other diehard. And usually that the person whom is crossing water is a diehard and at least understands proper setup. So you guys can hunt with each other or around each other and hunt an area and work together. So, a lot of people talk about it, but it's just, man, water's hard and nobody wants to do it. And so if you can cross water, use it to your advantage, that's huge. And that kind of leads into like swamp, CRP type hunting. I like to find those island or high points, even in just big overgrown old ag fields or CRP, you find those little pockets of brushy pockets or a couple like little trees and whatnot. And I call it, you can essentially look at it like swamp hunting as like the high point of the island. Those are going to be the specifics that you key in on. If you really want to dive into very, very specific swamp hunting, when you find cattail marshes, there's a couple areas out there where you find high points where the cattails will thin. And if you can see that thin, that's actually, you might think that that's water, but as long as you're far from the main water feature, it's thinned because that's actually a drier point. And a lot of times I'll find the bucks that lay in that. So that's a little, you can see a big vast pocket, and then when you see that little weird, almost looks like a thin pocket out there, that a lot of times that's the dry point, and you can kind of key in on the trail that comes off of that. Got some good footage of some bucks coming out of those little pockets, but obviously everybody knows like islands, island bedding, just the big thicket pockets out there, and like the marshes or the CRP. If you have CRP, I find they generally bed on the edges unless there's a pocket out there, some type of, brushy, like a tree with a couple clumps of brush around it, something like that. Those are, the things you want to kind of key in on. Anything that's going to stop a person. And you'd be surprised. People generally, when you get grass like chest high or higher, like with like true CRP or some of those big overgrown plantings, you'd be surprised. People don't want to push through them. They'd rather just hunt the edges. So if you can push through and find a little pocket, perfect example. Go watch Brian Rogers from Good Sit Mobile with his buck. It's even on the Lone Wolf Customs gear. He shot his second buck 2 years ago out of this tiny like little pin oak or something, and he's in that tall grassy type terrain with sporadic brush, and he just picked that pocket that's out there kind of in the middle of all of that. And he talks about how guys were down on the edge and down in the area, and he ended up having that cruiser come through, I believe it was like midday or whatnot, and he plugged him. And because that works two ways: one, it can work as bedding; two, he's getting away from guys because they don't want to be out in that sea of vastness; and three, that buck is using that only bigger tree in the area as almost like a waypoint when you're in those big grass seas, vast seas of like almost nothing. So it's almost like they key, because they're way shorter than us. So it's almost like that's all they can see. And so a lot of times you'll see trails that they just kind of key and get close to those, and then they pivot off, even though there's maybe a straighter line somewhere else.
Yeah, that's something I figured out the hard way, watching deer go to that while I'm hunting because someone else came from the other direction and their wind and pushing. And something, I've heard you talk about it on here. I've heard you talk about a couple other places, but I think really important to touch on is your J hook method. I think that's something that a lot of people haven't probably heard of. And I think that could potentially change them killing a bigger deer. So what is your J hook method?
So essentially, just think of the J hook like how a buck J hooks his bed, right? He's J hooking his bed to get that wind advantage and come in. You only use a J hook in limited situations. It's a specific tool, right? You don't want to just constantly J hook everything you're doing, but it's just another tool, especially when you have an older buck that's hard to kill. And this is how it came about. It come about because I constantly was looking at maps where bucks were in corners of public or in areas where from the main access, from the actual access that's like feasible, right? Not just some ludicrous access. Where you're coming in from legitimately the entire other side of of the public, or crossing 2-3 rivers or something, something just ludicrous. These bucks would be held up in spots that from the main access, their back door is going into private, or going, somewhere where you can't be really, physically can't be. I mean, like, again, there's always access everywhere, but logistically and logically, you just have to kill so much to get in there. It'd be ridiculous. And so I started having to kind of out of necessity think of ways to get on some of these bucks that were, unkillable, you could say. And it come up with, I was like, well, I was thinking about bucks J hooking, how they J hook their beds. And I was like, what if I J hooked them in their bed? And I was like, I'm going to pull a move from them, onto them. And again, if you have backdoor access that's not being hunted and it's the primo and it and you have a clean way in, that's still your go-to. That should be your number one. But if that back door is being hunted by other guys, or these bucks are in this corner of the public, or just the access, you really need to come in from a specific side, which is to their advantage, then I start to try to just J hook into them, to where you're essentially paralleling them and then passing them, and then you're hooking into that back door. Give yourself a wide hook. I mean, you want to be wide hook, and you don't want to be trying to bed hunt them and hook in right against them. You're gonna need to go past them quite a ways, come down, and hook in. And a big thing about that too is if they're in a bedding area, you're killing half of that bedding to whatever you're doing. So you have to be sure that that buck is not only there, but he's on that half or in that side or in this pocket. And the guy here in the middle, I killed him with a J hook, and I had to blow my wind into him. But that was just because he was so tight to that corner. There was no other clean access. You couldn't come in the back door. You would have had to either have private permission, or I had to J hook him, and everybody else was up the ridge. And I'm sure the buck winded me, assuming he was, in the pocket and he didn't just come from somewhere off and just happened to run through the situation. But I'm pretty confident he was in that pocket compared to like other videos, and I know other guys hunting him, and he was commonly in that pocket. He was just unhuntable. He would catch anybody coming in, wind them, see them, whatever. And I had to make a big J hook, and so I went as far as I could away from him, J hooked in. I'm sure he caught some wind at like 100, 150 yards, probably perked up. But then I went past him. He probably thought I was hunting where everybody else was hunting, expecting him to shoot out that door. And I hooked in all the way out and around with a safe wind now, and got tight, a lot tighter to that bed, 60, 70 yards off that bed, and was able to set up and catch him coming out the back door, but also kind of the side back door, which is how the Wisconsin bucks got away from me. There's two back doors. They chose the one I wasn't on, but preferably if you can J hook them, do it without your wind going at them. That's, if you have an option to do that, then that's your primo option, because obviously then you're still not alerting them that you're even there at all. But you're just, if you have a buck that's in a corner or way back up against private, and you just don't have a lot of clean access from that angle, or you're, the depth of the public is so vast from that behind him that you really can't come into, then essentially you're just coming down where you think he is. You're coming in paralleling him, doing like 100, 150 yard hook, and then you're hooking right back in and trying to bed hunt him. Or you can sit farther back, just make sure you know where that back door is to catch him coming out. Otherwise, I like to try to get in and try to bed hunt him, because you have obviously higher odds at catching them on one of the spoke trails.
Huh. Yeah, that's a cool theory I never really thought of, but it makes perfect sense once you hear it. So to kind of break away, we kind of broke down, what you look for when you pull up to a new piece. I think that's very important. But I'm going to talk to the smaller side of the hunting world, is the self-filmers. Gunnar and I started this in 2019, and to say that if we knew it all would be crazy, and to say that we knew 75% since 2019 still would be crazy. So I definitely know what I'm talking about when I talk about self-filming, of how hard it is, the art. And something I want to say that I highly commend you on is you talk about passing deer to get the shot. I think that's something a lot of people, it's the other way around. They're going to pass the shot on the camera to get the deer. And so I've heard you talk about that a lot, so I want to applaud you for that. But how hard was it for you to learn the self-filming? And I know you're never going to fully learn self-filming, because it's always something changes in the world. But how hard was it for you to start, and how hard has it been to start learning it?
I mean, I kind of started like everybody with just like a handy cam. That was my first couple years back in Michigan, with just the atrocious footage. Like I said, guys can go watch that if they really want to. It's pretty embarrassing between my skills and just the stuff I would say. But go check it out if you want a good laugh where like the audio is tuned way too high for music, and it's like really crappy copyright free music that is obviously too, like I said, too loud, and I'm trying to talk and you can't hear nothing and the camera's shaking. If you want to see that, man, by all means go check it out. I'd appreciate the view on it. But it's like anything, it's a growing experience. And the Midwest Whitetail, man, they elevated my game immensely. They just accelerated my abilities. Now I'll be honest, I am a far better editor than I am a cameraman, and I probably forever will be. I just frankly suck at filming. There's just no way around it, especially when a big buck is coming in. the camera, I don't understand. I have bought every mount that is, I even have gone back and bought the old muddy triangle mounts that are like 15 pounds that are like triple strapped to the tree. And it helps, don't get me wrong, but I'm telling you, when I got bucks coming in, I'm beginning to think the whole tree just shakes now because the camera just is going. So it's just shaking. I don't know what to tell guys. I do my best I can. I stabilize like 90% of my footage. I just suck at filming. So, I've gotten to a point where I've compensated with better editing skills. And so my stuff is at least watchable now. And I've improved every year. But it is an art. Not only are trying to, I don't want to say, I'm not throwing him under the bus or anything when I say this. Dan Infalt made a comment one time that it's impossible to film bed hunting and like beast style tactics for public land and do it with, proper, like real, like professional camera gear at a high level. And I heard that and I didn't take that as I took it as a challenge. Yeah. And ever since then, I've attempted to do that. I would love one day to have a cameraman or something, that would be great. I say that, but I don't know. Maybe it would be harder. Yeah. I don't know if I want to get that close to a buck with a cameraman. It's like a love-hate relationship, but at the end of the day, I do love the challenge. There's been a couple times where maybe I'm filming other people or I'm out, camera. Like I think one time I forgot a mount last year, so I couldn't pull my main angle camera out. And I'm sitting there and I'm way back and I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to hunt. If something comes out, whatever, and I'm sitting there and I was honestly like, man, I kind of miss film, like taking the shots and filming and looking around. I'm like, oh, I should film that, or oh, I should pan this, or, take this shot or do this interview. And I was like, I don't know. It was like 40 minutes before dark. And I'm like, never mind, I'm leaving. I don't want to kill something off film. It's ridiculous, but I'm addicted to that and the mature buck side. And I will say the buck here in the middle, he come in really fast from the bedding. I didn't expect him. He kind of was skirting me. And so I did get a little bit of footage of him. And then when I drew back, he steps out of frame. So I'm sorry. I did, lose the exact shot. My bad. But I filmed everything else and I made sure the Wisconsin buck was in frame this time. I was like, he's coming in and I pulled it out and I'm like, I got the camera's 4K. I'm like, I'll just zoom in post. So I pulled out and I put it there and I'm like, he's going to be in frame,
What camera do you run? Do you run a video camera or do you run like a mirrorless, or what's your camera setup?
I have a Canon G50. So it's a video camera. I had the G21. Yep, I had the G21 for a while, which was 1080, but because I hunt swamps and big vast areas in CRP, I really needed that extended digital zoom, and the G50 has the 4K from the 1080. Has a little bit of more image stabilization. Only thing I hate about it. Everything else is better. It's almost identical audio settings and whatnot. The one thing, the better touch screen and whatnot, that's cool. The one thing I hate about it, though, is that because of the 4K and the higher frame rate, even when you go in and you manually turn the settings down, something built into that lens or whatever is on that lens, it does not have as good low light capability as the G21. Yeah. There was bucks that would come in. I mean, there was no time left, and I'm like, well, I can still in post probably make this look, viewable, right? It'd be grainy, but like I could have shot the buck. Now, if something comes in and it's 15 minutes before the end of shooting light, you can't. It looks pitch black. And there's nothing I can do in post. The camera's on max settings. Like I have everything manually turned, and I just lose that 15 minutes, which just for public land, you have, I mean, I know, like you know how many times that's the moment that the buck comes in, and I'm like, I guess I just have to get better now. I have to be that much closer now. So again, it just adds to that challenge where there's been a lot of times I've boogered up hunts because I'm coming in and I'm looking at a tree like that would be the spot. And then I'm thinking camera's back there. He hits it after dark, timing wise, where he's bedded. He's probably getting right here at last light. And usually I'd be like, that's the setup. There's the money. Yeah. And now I'm like, okay, so let's look 50 yards ahead that way because I need to be over there 50 more yards. I'm like, yeah, that's going to suck getting over there. So, okay, you know, and then it takes an hour to get there and you're climbing the tree and you hear, you're like, okay, well, that was a great night. That was fun.
So I'm on the flip side of that. My mirrorless Sony will pick up deer before I can see them, and I can sit there. And I've sat there and seen racks and started shaking before I can actually pick them out. And I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like, and I've had times I've been like, I can see it on the camera. It's not even. I still have 5 minutes left, and I have a video of me watching a buck in front of me at 30 yards eating, and people are like, why didn't you shoot him there? I couldn't legally do it. And
are you running an A7?
The 6400 A6400. Okay. It's not as good as A7, but it's still a workhorse. But by the time he got around me, it's daylight, and I couldn't get him to stop, and I missed. It would have been my biggest. It's still been probably my biggest buck with my bow today. But I'm actually going to switch. Another thing on that is I'm going to buy the new G70, which is upgraded from the G50. I don't know if you've seen it, and it's supposed to have better that lighting to take in to see. It's supposed to be better. So that's why I think we're both going to upgrade to a G70. But my issue is I have to have both hands on the camera to zoom, to do stuff. And when you're bow hunting, 2 hands on a camera and you're bow hanging, you're hurting yourself.
Which is why I don't do the mirrorless is right there. But the A7, to interrupt a little bit, the A7, like the A7, I don't think the 3, but the 4. So if you can find the $5,000 or $6,000 for a used one, and it's primo, they have a feature on there. I got to play with it with some of the shows that I work for, where you can legitimately just click on the screen and it will track in autofocus for you. So when the buck's coming in, you can just have it at a general setting, and that thing's like 8K too. So you can have it pulled way out, and I mean, you can have it set up to where you don't have it ever zoomed. And for bow season, the buck comes in, you have it, and it tracks, does everything for you, and the camera never moves. It's just sitting next to you, and it can track everything for you. Gets right down into bow range, you shoot it, and then in post, you can just do all the editing for that. And you just move the screen, and because it's like 8K or something ridiculous, you could do like 16 times digital zoom, and so you could look at the nose hairs on the buck still from 60 yards with no zoom, and it's mind blowing. I just don't have $6,000 for a used mirrorless that I also need to buy a lens for and the mic setups. But if I did, that's the one I would go for.
I like the 6400 for what it is. It's lower in scale. It does have a focus like that. I don't think it's the full on tracking, and it saved me a lot of times. But even like we do a lot of predator hunting after season, and it's like, all right, I have a coyote running in. I got to have 2 hands on the camera. I hope he doesn't see me. Grab my gun, pull it up. Hopefully he's in that frame. And a lot of times coyotes aren't 60 yards out. They're 100, 150, 200 yards. So I'm going to make that switch this year and see what it does. So. Self-filming, it's an expensive game to be good at it and to have the equipment. And it gets expensive about every 2 years because your camera gets outdated. It's aggravating. Self-filming it's an art. And that's what Gunner and I tell everyone, like, you have to shoot them twice when you self-film. You got to have them on the camera and you got to shoot them. And there's been a lot of times that it's like, maybe I have good enough footage. I'm going to let this shot go. And hopefully he's there, And learning not to do that has probably been the biggest struggle on our end. So, but people don't really understand. They're like, "Well, why didn't you get this on camera?" And I'm like, "Here, dude, take my camera for a day."
Just the movement. Guys don't realize, like, just the a buck comes and surprises you, and as a filmer, your first go-to isn't the bow, it's the camera. And so you're trying to move to get the camera on him. Then by the time you get the camera on him, maybe he's already almost past you. Then you're trying to go for the bow. You're trying to figure it out. And, a lot of times maybe he caught you in that movement. And so you're trying to do, 3 things, keep him in frame, do all this. And then you're like, bye, and you just watched, your third biggest buck ever just walk through your life broad daylight and walk out on public land. It happens, so like I have a couple stories where I'm like, well, I didn't get it on film, or that episode is not going to really be an episode because the buck wasn't on film or whatever like that. And guys were just like, well, why not? I'm like, man, I can't be perfect every single day. Sorry. There's a lot to it, especially at a high end. The high end is just the difference between just like this, and I'm not shitting on anybody, but like the handy cam level, or just running like that 360 GoPro, that
Or
versus
your phone.
truly running your second angle. Or sometimes I see guys with two second angles and then your main angle, and you're trying to hunt, and then you're trying to do it on public land, or just, even just getting, on a mature buck in general, and you're trying to film. It's another level, and
Yeah.
it's guys just don't. I don't think it's appreciated as often as it should be.
No, no, it's funny. Well, why don't you get a cameraman? I'm like, well, now I got to have two people in there doing the same movements. And I'm
Yeah,
there going, do you have him here? No, well, give me the camera, and I'm going to get him there. Now I just have someone in the tree stand that smells and is going to move, and it's just like,
uh-huh.
leave. But it's now when we go out of state, we try to take someone because we're more on the ground and stuff like that. But man, it's self filming is unreal, and that's what we're just now getting level of videos of what we wanted to be 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So we're still 3 or 4 years behind to be where I think we should be. And it's just everyone's like, well, it should be easy. I'm like, dude, I'll give you my camera for a day. You go in your yard, you video some squirrels and try to keep it in that camera. And then I'll let you bring that camera in and use all my stuff to edit. And you try to edit and make a good video and sit here and go, people are going to watch this. Because
Yeah.
that's the hard part too. You have 2 hours of good footage. People aren't going to watch 2 hours of good footage. You got to figure out what that middle 20 minutes all the way to the hour is. So, but
Yeah, I mean, that's, we could dive into that too. Midwest Whitetails talked about like video length and timing and how long it has to be between like action shots and certain angles and setups and whatnot. And that's a whole thing too. And because I am more of that public land side, sometimes I only have 8 to 10 minutes of footage. Like I'm gonna say that I have 12 to 15 minutes of footage, and I can maybe squeeze out that 8 to 10. And sometimes it does drag a little bit. It gets a little bit more boring. But when you're really shooting like a production, there's just trying to fit all like, an hour into 20 minutes and then make that 20 minutes watchable, and then people are actually going to maintain their attention span. There's
yeah.
a lot to it that people don't realize that goes into it.
And TikTok and Reels and all these shorts did not help the people like us. Now people's attention is 30 seconds to a minute, and you're like, man, I got to keep them for 40. Like, how am I going to do it? So,
Well, and that's like, I hate when guys add, and if they do it, whatever. But for my own videos, I don't like to put the initial like 30 seconds where I'm like drawn back, shooting the buck, or like I like to watch the video, even though I seen the thumbnail. I like to watch the video and be like, okay, what's happening next? Is he going to kill the buck, whatever? And so when guys do that, I know why they do it. They have to nowadays because people are not. They're going to click off the video otherwise. I just wish it didn't have to be like that. I wish, I almost like the days when I'd get up for school and I'd flip on the hunting channel and I'd watch an episode and I didn't know if they were going to kill it all. Sometimes they didn't. I love those episodes, where and a lot of my videos, guys, we didn't kill nothing. Why didn't you kill nothing? And it's like, well, I'm making what I used to watch, and that was episodes where you didn't always kill something. And so I put those out. Yeah, it's showing what is really happening. You don't kill every single day. So
going on for the season, what's your plan for the year? Are you just hunting one state? You're traveling a little bit, which I know you already said you're traveling, but kind of what tags do you have, and what are you looking forward to do this year?
yeah, so this year should be pretty dang extensive unless something catastrophic happens. I've been really working with my finances and doing what I can to make sure I can have just a crazy year. Plan to do Kentucky for the first 2 weeks there, because it opens really early, obviously. So I'm going to go to Kentucky, hit that for 2 weeks. It's either, till I kill or 2 weeks, pretty much. I'll be camping in my car until I can get something done. And then I'm going to flip over to Wisconsin and hunt that until about the beginning of October. And again, 2 weeks unless I kill. And then I'm going to play October by ear. If I have that giant buck that I'm after, that potential 200, if I can get on him and he's daylighting or doing something predictable, I might move in on him. But if not, then I think I'm going to go to Illinois. I've put a lot of time in with Brian Rogers from Good Sit Mobile, doing a lot of scouting the past 2-3 years. So I have a ton of intel. I think I could potentially get it done in early October there. So I might go out there, burn some time out there if my big guy's not showing up. And then I'm definitely 100% going to be back in Iowa from like the 24th of October, 25th of October through the main portion of the rut, probably into like November 25th-ish, something like that. Hopefully I kill and get it done. I should. I always have at least a couple opportunities. I just can't miss. That's the main thing. As long as I don't miss, we'll be good to go. I'll get it done here in Iowa then if I have to. I don't know if I'm going to hunt the big guy in the rut. If he's still showing up, then sure. If not, then I'm going to branch off. I have plenty of other targets this year already. So I'll jump into those areas and try to take a rut buck. I know that's not as cool as bed hunting them, but whatever. I'll be happy either way. And then if I still hold a tag anywhere, then we have a 2-week gun season here from basically like the end of November through December 20th. That time frame is usually a shotgun season that I don't do here because I do the late season muzzleloader. So because I won't be in here for gun season, if I have an open tag, I'm going to go back to that state, try to fill it during that time. If I have filled those tags, then I'm probably going to go to Ohio during that time frame. Try my hand at Ohio, play around out there for a little bit, and then I'm going to be back in Iowa for the late season until January, and that will probably be my season. I might, because at that point I will have to pick up full time with college again. I'm going to be doing part time for the deer season, so I'll be doing all this and be in college. So I'm full time right now. Come August, I go down to part time so I can hunt. But I'll be back to like full time in January unless something major changes. So like after mid-January, probably won't be traveling or doing too much in any states. I'll probably just call my season there.
Sweet. So anyone that's listening, where can they find your videos and your geez, why did I just go blank? And where can they find all the handles to your Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, so it's super easy. Everybody can find me at Public Land Whitetails. That's going to be on Facebook and YouTube. Facebook, I have a page and a group. The page is obviously just dedicated to more following along with the show. The group is where you can post your own experiences, your own stories for public land. Anything to do with public land. Doesn't have to just be whitetails. Just keep it PG and be cool with others in the comments. We don't need a ton of fighting. We are one community after all. YouTube's a little bit smaller of a community, but just Public Land Whitetails, you can find me there. I post just everything on Facebook that I do there. Just YouTube doesn't promote me as much as Facebook for whatever reason. And then I just have my personal handle, Cody Huhn, on Facebook, and it's just more of me. And then on Instagram, which is technically the official Public Land Whitetails Instagram.
Okay, so I'll put that in the description below like we do every episode. So you guys go check him out. His videos are insane. I've been watching them, especially since I knew you were going to hop on this episode. I was like, I got to go watch some of this stuff. And then I watched one and it was this domino effect. So you guys can go check that out. Good luck this year. And Cody, thank you for hopping on our podcast and talking about public land with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.